Okay, real quick, let's take a look at that KD ratio. We're up to 1.710. Before you guys start spinning around on Axel, I know the KD ratio doesn't mean shit. I appreciate every comment that I get that tells me that the KD ratio doesn't mean shit, and I appreciate every single comment I get on how to raise it. And if you guys, by the way, if you guys see something I'm doing wrong, I definitely take that stuff to heart. And I appreciate it. Thank you so much. But the reason why I'm doing the KD ratio is twofold. One, it's letting me know, am I doing good or bad? Okay, is it going up? I'm doing better. If it's going down, all right, I'm doing something wrong I need to fix, right? I'm not spun around the axle on the number so much as is it going up or down. The second reason why I keep mentioning it at the beginning of every video is it's kind of become a thing. Just like the critical drinker at the end of his videos goes, that's all I have for today, now go away now. My wife hates that accent. I'm sorry, I mean no offense, critical drinker, if you're watching, I love your stuff. Sorry, I try to be funny. So it's kind of become a thing, and that's why I keep doing it. It's not a big deal to me. So I appreciate all the comments about it, but just know it's not a big deal to me. This video is called Tanks for the Memories. The entire thing is tank battles. Basically where I'm slaughtering people. If you guys see anything, again, please comment. In this match, the first one, I was actually a #1 player. Had 76 kills from the tank. I was #1. Satan saw the weather report. It snowed in hell this week. So that's what this is going on. The reason this one is called Tanks for the Memories, I'm going to talk about the academy that I went to. I was going to do how to make money. I was doing a series on money. I started off like what it is, what's inflation, credit cards, how they work. Just doesn't seem to resonate. You guys just don't seem to want to to see watch me talk about money. I was going to talk about on this video. I was going to talk about how to make money, different ways of making it, give you guys ideas that for these people that are really struggling about how to start your own business, or how to start a business with nothing but an idea and no money. I have some ideas that I could pass on to you, or people that wanted to get a trade where you can get money to pay for trade schools. But it just doesn't seem to resonate. Nobody seems to want to care. This last weekend I played with several people who wanted to play with me, and one thing I heard loud and clear is that they wanted more sea stories. They wanted to hear adventures that I've had. So that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm going to try to mix it up. I still think the money ones may play out well over time. Adventures I've had. Let's see. I've been to 23 countries, all 50 states, and I've almost circumnavigated the globe. I haven't crossed the Indian Ocean yet. It's about the only thing I'm missing. I've circumnavigated the United States as far as you can with water. I've been through the Great Lakes, up through the St. Lawrence Seaway, down around the coast, through the Panama Canal, up to Alaska, through the Aleutian Chain. I've seen a lot. I've done a lot. I've seen people in foreign countries that just sit there and drop trout and do their business in the road. I've been on piers where I thought it was a dog at the end of the pier, and it was a rat that was the size of a terrier. I've had a mother try to sell me her daughter overseas to get her out of communist occupation areas. I've seen a lot. I've done a lot. And people that in this country that badmouth this country, I would suggest you get your ass overseas and see what it's like overseas before you badmouth this country. I've seen how bad it is overseas. And this country is paradise on earth, and you guys need to learn to appreciate it. Okay, so I'm going to talk. Okay, so that was the end of that one. #1 squad. So let's talk about the academy real quick, and I'm going to start with what inspired me to go to an academy. So a long time ago, when dinosaurs roamed the earth and men were men and sheep were nervous. as a 7-year-old boy, my family did a vacation to Washington, D.C. We had family up there. My second cousin was actually a full bird colonel with the Air Force in the Pentagon. And this man took 3 days off work at the Pentagon to take a 7-year-old boy through the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum. He answered every question. He pointed out he talked about the X-1, the Bell X-1, where Chuck Yeager broke the sound barrier for the first time. He pointed out, the Spirit of St. Louis, and the first transatlantic crossing, the space capsules from Apollo. I mean, he filled this kid with wonder, this 7-year-old boy. And we were staying at his house, family, right, back in the day. And in his den, he had paintings in his den of aircraft that he flew during Vietnam. And I would sit on the floor, and he'd be at his desk, and he'd be sitting there telling me stories. He used to fly the Puff the Magic Dragon during Vietnam. And he'd talk about how, the Puff the Magic Dragon, it was the predecessor to the AC-130 Spirit. Basically, it was a C-47, like DC-3, twin prop transport plane that they mounted 20 millimeter cannons on one side. And he would talk about he would fly up and down. I can't remember the name of the river right now, but he'd fly up and down the river, and he'd say that the Viet Cong sampans had motors on them. And that's how they knew that they were enemies transporting goods. And he'd bank the plane over and sit there and just open up on them until the infrared, until the glow of the engines went away. They knew they sunk it. But he's sitting there filling the 7-year-old kid with wonder about, I'm like, I want to be this guy, right? This guy was super cool in my eyes. Now, my father was my hero, but this man was inspirational. So I decided then that I wanted to be a pilot, and I focused my life on that. And then I was kind of reinforced in the 6th grade. I had a school teacher by the name of Mrs. Price who made me write a paper about what I wanted to be when I grew up. And so I researched about how to become a fighter pilot. I knew I wanted to be one, but how do I get there? And I talked to recruiters, and I talked to different military veterans, and everybody said, like, if you want to be a pilot, you go to an academy, right? Well, okay, there's my answer, man. I'm going to an academy, and I focused my life to going to an academy from then on. I joined an organization called Civil Air Patrol. Excuse me. Civil Air Patrol was it's kind of like Sea Scouts or like Boy Scouts, but it was for Air Force, and that's where I met Hustler, was in Civil Air Patrol. And in high school, I took the hardest classes I could get. I didn't date cheerleaders. Remember that story I said in the other one about the cheerleader inequality? I had a crush on one, but I wasn't gonna let a girl interfere with my goal of getting into an academy. And I knew that if I started chasing tail in high school, that I would be too distracted to stay focused to get where I wanted to go. So in high school, I lettered in swimming and track. I was in, the math club, the computer club, debate team, yearbook photographer. What else? No football. I didn't want to play football because I wanted my knees intact. If I blew my knee out, I knew I'd be not qualified to fly. So any sport I did in high school was non-impact. So I got to right out of high school. I actually missed. I aimed for Annapolis. I only applied to Annapolis only. I missed. I never did find out why I missed, but I missed for some reason. I went to a local university for a year. I reapplied the year after. I didn't want to go Air Force for two simple reasons. One, if I couldn't fly, I was going to be sitting in a missile silo or signing off on maintenance reports for planes that I did want to fly. Or if I did fly, there was a good chance I'd be flying B-52s, I'd be flying KC-135s, I'd be flying C-130s, I'd be flying big things that I really didn't want to fly. I figured in the Navy, everything had to fit on a boat, right? So the odds of flying a fighter or an attack aircraft were much higher in the Navy than it was in the Air Force. So I was gung-ho for Navy. So when I missed Annapolis, the first year out of high school. I did some more research and I found one called Kings Point. Now, I am a graduate of Kings Point, the United States Merchant Marine Academy. It is one of the 5 federal academies that is fully funded. There's no tuition. It's full. It's a full ride. And there's 5 academies, right? There's Annapolis for the Navy. There's West Point for the Army. There's Air Force Academy in Colorado for people who like the Gulf. There's Coast Guard Academy, for those guys that are afraid of open water, like the brown water Navy. And then there's the Merchant Marine Academy. Now, Merchant Marine is basically the civilian organization that drives merchant ships. And this academy was founded during World War II to man the Liberty ships that were being built by the thousands. They needed crews. So that's when this academy was founded in 1943. So the reason, now I got accepted into Navy Prep and I got accepted into Kings Point my second year trying. I chose Kings Point for this reason, and pretty much this reason only. My options to fly out of Kings Point was greater than that out of Annapolis, and I'll explain. So if you go into any branch, any academy, if you go into West Point, you're going in the Army, period. Right? If you want to fly, you're flying helicopters. If you go to Air Force Academy, right, you're going in the Air Force, and if you can't fly, you're sitting in a missile silo. If you go Annapolis, you can go Marine Corps or Navy, which gives you more options. But it's still, you only 2 branches. Coast Guard, you're flying a helicopter or maybe a storm tracker. And at Kings Point, and I'm telling you, this is the greatest secret in America because nobody's heard of this school. So it was easier to get an appointment to go to Kings Point than it was to Annapolis, because Annapolis had like 28,000 applicants for 1,300 positions. So at Kings Point, you get a commission. When you graduate, you get a commission, and you can take that commission in any of the armed forces. You can take a commission in the Navy. You can take a commission in the Army. You can take a commission in the Marine Corps. Take a commission in the Coast Guard. You getting the idea here? You can take a commission in the Air Force. I knew guys that flew for the Marines, that flew Coast Guard, that flew Army. You could go any branch you want out of Kings Point. And if you choose to, you don't have to go anywhere. You can actually sail in the civilian fleet. The only commitment is that you have to keep your Coast Guard license for 10 years, and you have to be in the United States Naval Reserve, right? So if you don't take an active duty, those are the civilian requirements. So the requirement, you get a full ride, and you don't, if you don't want to, be active duty, you don't have to be active duty. I mean, and you can, and if you want to go active duty, you can pick any branch in the service you want. That's huge, right? That is huge. It's a smaller school. It's not the same size as, Air Force, West Point, or Annapolis, whose class size is around 1,600. At least at the time, I think they've shrunk since then. Our class size was around 300. So, we had a regiment, right? That's all we had. And we had six companies, which is a regiment. Each class was about 300, so smaller classes. So, when I looked at the opportunities that Kings Point presented, I thought it was better than me waiting another year, because if I went to prep school, I'd have to wait another year to get into Annapolis. Because you have to go through prep school, and usually by the time you finish prep school, if you do well, then you're automatically rolled into the next, Annapolis class. So that would be 6 years of school for me if I chose the prep school, and that was another reason, right? So I went to Kings Point. So anybody is looking at an academy, take a look at Kings Point, man. It's a pretty sweet ride. So I reported for what's called in-dock summer, indoctrination, in-dock summer. And by the way, did you see that? That guy drove his four-wheeler full of C4 into my tank. I saw him coming, so he wasn't able to pop. So we reported for in-dock summer in July of 1996. At the time, the school had no air conditioning. Hear me on that. No air conditioning. If you were hot, there were two places on campus that had air conditioning: the library and the mess hall, and that was about it. You sweat. So when we reported, they shaved our heads. They put us in khaki shirts, khaki shorts, black socks, knee socks, with black Oxford shoes. And we'd PT'd in this. We had PT clothes, but this is what we wore every day. And man, they got right. I'm telling you, after a while. We got a book called the Bearings Book. It's a little pocket-sized book that had all the trivia about the school. Largest freestanding flagpole, the latitude and longitude of the flagpole, the name of all the different buildings, right? So you knew where mess hall was and stuff. Had the name of the different types of ships, and we were quizzed on these regularly. And if you failed, you ended up doing push-ups. And it was funny talk about push-ups. At the time that I went in, we still did push-ups. And I'll remember one of the DIs got a care package from home, and this DI got Rice Krispie treats, and decided to auction off a Rice Krispie treat for push-ups. And everybody in the entire platoon was, bidding on these ice cream or on this Rice Krispie treat, and I wasn't bidding, and they noticed, and they're like, "Why aren't you bidding?" And I said, "Well, I figure I do enough push-ups, so I don't want to do any more." And they told me that, because of that attitude, I was going to do twice as many push-ups as the winner if I didn't win. So I ended up winning. Ended up doing 120 push-ups for a fucking Rice Krispie treat. Anyways, I talked to a couple of my classmates the other night about what other things I should mention, and they wanted me to mention one thing that came up was plebe beats. Plebe beats, when you go in, you're a plebe, right? You're not a freshman, you're not a fourth classman. You're a plebe until you are recognized, and that's all, and then you become a fourth classman, right? That's when you get recognized as being worthy to join the regiment. And that was usually, fall, usually around October, November is about the time you get recognized. But in the summertime, during Indoc summer, they did this thing called plebe beats. And plebe beat is where they would take all the incoming class and they would pack them into a barracks. It was actually a dorm, right? You can go online. You can see videos of Kings Point. Go look at the Gundam style video. You can kind of get an idea of what the campus looks like. But there were rooms, and then there was a hallway and doors, leading into the rooms. And they pack us into these halls, shoulder to shoulder, right? No air conditioning. In the summer in New York, like 80, 90 degrees, man. We were like dumping sweat, and we were at a position called the brace. And the brace is when you're standing at attention, and you put your chin on your all the way down to you're touching your neck or your collarbone, and then you put the back of your skull onto the wall. That's called a brace. So we're sitting there bracing, and the DIs would march in pair, in two columns, and you could hear them. They would stomp their left foot as they came in. Thump, 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 thump. And you hear them coming. You're like, oh shit! Thump, 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 thump. You're like, oh shit! Here they come. And they would come in, and then they would stop, and then left or right face, and they would square off on us, and they would sit there and just tear us a new asshole. They would ask us questions out of the Bearings book. They would ask us, like, what's the mission of the Starship Enterprise? They would ask you all kinds of stuff. You had to know the answer. If you didn't, you're on your face doing push-ups. And after I racked off 50 push-ups for this one guy, and he moved on, I got this bright idea. I'm like, I stepped off the wall, and I started singing the national anthem. And I just repeated the national anthem like 3 or 4 times until that one plebe beat was over. And every time a DI came by, he saw me sitting there, singing the national anthem as loud as I could. Figured I was already being punished and would move on and leave me alone. Right there, look. If you're fighting in this game, and don't fucking tailgate the tank in front doing the fight so he can't back up when he's getting hammered. Because if you notice, there was an IFV that pulled right up and I couldn't back out. Okay, I'm gonna wrap this one here. As I continue to just talk about Kings Point. I noticed when I was all said and done, it was at almost 43 minutes long. I just think that's too long for a single video. So I'm splicing it into basically two 20-minute ones. The part B will go up tomorrow. It will pick up exactly where I left off. And so that's it for this one. This is Sea Bear out.